A 7-month pregnant wife, a Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a love story that magazines called a modern fairy tale. Yasmin Redford had it all. Her husband, tech billionaire Howard Redford, was the man who had everything, and he'd given it all to her. So when he told her he was flying to St. Barts for a final solitary retreat before their baby arrived, she kissed him goodbye. But billionaires don't fly commercial, and when a private jet's manifest is leaked, secrets have nowhere to hide. Howard wasn't alone. He was with his mistress on a lavish baby moon celebrating a different baby. What he didn't know was that while he was sipping champagne at 40,000 feet, his pregnant wife was meeting with the most ruthless divorce attorney in New York. The divorce papers were already drafted. The courier was already booked. And paradise was about to become a prison. The city lights of Manhattan glittered below the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, a sprawling universe of captured stars. To Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford, they were just part of the wallpaper of her life. A life so meticulously curated for perfection, it felt at times like a museum exhibit. She was the primary installation, the beautiful, intelligent wife of Howard Redford, the boy wonder of the fintech world. At 33, Howard was a force of nature. He had the restless energy of a man who believed he could bend the world to his will, and the track record to prove it. His company, Nexus Capital, had revolutionized algorithmic trading, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp jaw eyes, the color of a stormy sea that held a perpetual spark of ambition, and a smile that could disarm world leaders and charm seasoned investors with equal ease. They had met at a charity gala 5 years prior. Yasmin, then a rising star in the art curation world, possessed a quiet grace and a formidable intellect that Howard found captivating. She wasn't just another socialite drawn to his flame. She challenged him, debated with him, and saw the man behind the myth. Her family, the Vanderbilts, were old money steeped in traditions, and a quiet, unshakable influence that made Howard's new money flashiness seem almost crude in comparison. Their union was a merger of dynasties, a storybook romance that graced the covers of Vogue and Forbes simultaneously. Their home was a testament to their combined aesthetics. Howard's sleek minimalist tech seamlessly integrated with Yasmin's priceless collection of contemporary art and antique furniture. It was a palace in the sky on the 78th floor of 157, a monument to their success, their power, their love. And now, at 29, Yasmin was 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son. The final piece of the perfect picture was about to be set in place. She ran a hand over the gentle, firm swell of her belly, a protective primal gesture that had become second nature. The baby kicked, a fluttering reminder of the new life she was nurturing. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that rarely made it past the fortress of her public composure. "He's active tonight," she'd said an hour ago, hoping to draw Howard away from the holographic stock ticker glowing faintly in his home office. Howard had looked up, his focus slow to shift. "That's my boy, already planning his market takeover." He'd smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze was distant, his mind clearly still crunching numbers and closing deals a world away. This distance was a new thing, a subtle but persistent chill that had crept into their gilded cage over the past few months. At first, Yasmin had dismissed it as stress. Nexus Capital was in the middle of a massive global expansion, and Howard was pushing himself, as always, to the brink. There were more late nights at the office, more hushed phone calls taken in rooms he'd just exited, more weekends consumed by emergency board meetings. "It's the final push, darling," he'd assured her, stroking her hair, as she lay beside him in their cavernous bed. "Once the Asia deal is closed, it's just you and me and the little guy. I promise." Yasmin, wanting to believe him, had accepted it. She was a supportive wife, the anchor to his stratospheric ambition. But a thread of unease had been pulled, and now she couldn't stop it from unraveling the tapestry of their perfect life. The real shift, the one that planted a seed of cold dread in her heart, had a name: Chloe Sterling. Chloe was Howard's new protege. A 25-year-old coding prodigy from MIT, she was brilliant, beautiful, and possessed an ambition that mirrored Howard's own. He spoke of her with a reverence that bordered on obsessive. She sees the market in a way no one else does, he'd say. She's the future of the company. Yasmin had met her once at a company dinner. Chloe was a whirlwind of youthful energy with wide, doe-like eyes and a cascade of raven hair. She hung on Howard's every word, her hand brushing his arm a little too often, her laughter a little too loud, a little too intimate. Yasmin, a connoisseur of social subtleties, had recognized the performance instantly. It was the calculated, hungry ambition of a predator disguised as hero worship. She had felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. When she had gently mentioned to Howard that Chloe's professional admiration seemed to blur boundaries, he had become uncharacteristically defensive. "Don't be ridiculous, Yasmin," he'd snapped, his voice sharp. "You're being insecure. She's a kid. She's vital to the company. I can't have you making my top talent feel uncomfortable because you're feeling hormonal." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and dismissive. Hormonal. He had never spoken to her like that before. It was a dismissal not just of her concern, but of her perception of her very reality. The argument had escalated their first real venomous fight. They had reconciled, of course, with Howard, apologizing profusely, blaming his stress, and buying her a breathtaking diamond bracelet from Harry Winston as a peace offering. She wore it now, its cold weight a constant glittering reminder of that crack in their foundation. Tonight the unease was a physical presence in the silent penthouse. Howard was packing. He had announced it 2 days ago. "I need a break before the baby comes," he'd said, avoiding her eyes as he stared out at the city. "Just a few days to clear my head. I've booked a trip. St. Barts. Just me. I need to disconnect to come back ready to be a father." Yasmin's heart had constricted. St. Barts was their place. It was where he had proposed on the pristine white sands of Saline Beach. The thought of him there alone felt wrong. A desecration of a shared memory. Why alone? "Howard," she had asked, her voice quiet. "We could go together. A baby moon. Most couples do that." "You can't fly, Yasmin," he'd replied quickly, a little too quickly. "Doctor's orders. It's too close to your due date. It's not safe." She knew he was right about the flying restrictions, but the excuse felt hollow, a prepackaged, convenient truth. Still, she had relented. To fight him on it would only push him further away, would only validate his accusation of her being insecure and controlling. So she had smiled, helped him choose what to pack, and pretended to be the understanding, supportive wife. Now she stood in the doorway of their enormous walk-in closet, a space larger than most Manhattan apartments. Howard was carefully folding a lightweight linen shirt into his designer suitcase. He was packing for warm weather, for relaxation, for paradise. But as he reached into the back of his drawer, he palmed a small, unfamiliar box, and thinking she wasn't looking, slipped it into the side pocket of his carry-on. It wasn't a watch box or a cufflink box. It was smaller, more delicate. The size of a box for a woman's necklace or perhaps a ring. Yasmin's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She said nothing. She simply watched her mind, a maelstrom of denial and terrifying certainty. He was going to St. Barts, their special place, but he was not going alone. And he was bringing a gift. She retreated silently from the doorway, her hand protectively on her belly. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing his mother's distress. In the reflection of the vast dark window, Yasmin saw herself, a woman standing on the precipice of a great fall, the glittering city lights behind her no longer looking like stars, but like the cold, indifferent eyes of a world that was about to watch her perfect life shatter into a million pieces. The gilded cage had become a trap, and she was just beginning to realize the door had been locked from the outside. The kiss Howard gave her at the door was as fleeting as it was cold, a ghost of a touch against her cheek. "I'll call you when I land, darling," he said, the endearment sounding rehearsed. "I love you." "I love you too." Yasmin whispered the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. She watched the elevator doors slide shut, encasing him in polished brass, and the finality of it felt like a guillotine's drop. The silence he left behind was immense, a roaring vacuum where the hum of his presence used to be. For an hour, she did nothing. She simply stood in the grand foyer, her hand resting on a cool marble console table, her mind refusing to process the implications of the little box and the distant look in her husband's eyes. Denial was a warm, comforting blanket, and she wanted to wrap herself in it to sleep until he came back and proved her fears were nothing more than the paranoid fantasies of a hormonal pregnant woman. But Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford was not a woman who wallowed in denial for long. Her breeding, her education, her very nature were rooted in analysis and action. She had managed art galleries, negotiated with ruthless collectors, and navigated the treacherous social waters of New York's elite. She was a strategist. With a newfound icy resolve, she walked into Howard's home office. The room was his sanctuary, a temple of chrome and black leather. His primary desktop computer was locked, protected by a password so complex it was likely a string of code. But Howard was a creature of habit, and in his arrogance, convenience often trumped security. His personal laptop sat on the corner of the desk, still logged in. Her hands trembled as she moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, showing a half-finished email to his legal team about the Asia expansion. Her guilt was a sharp stabbing pain, but her suspicion was a roaring fire that consumed it. Where to even begin his emails? His calendar. She started with his browser history. Her eyes scanned the list, mostly financial news sites, tech blogs, and links to Nexus Capital's internal servers. Then she saw it. A series of searches from the past week, all centered around St. Barts. Best private villas. St. Barts, chef-catered meals. St. Barts, jewelry stores. Gustavia Cartier, Trinity, necklace price. And then the one that made her breath catch in her throat. St. Barts, medical clinic. Obstetrics. The word pulsed on the screen. Why would he be looking up pregnancy-related medical care in St. Barts? He had told her she couldn't fly. The only possible reason was that he was going with someone else who was pregnant. The pieces slammed together in her mind with brutal, sickening force. The distant behavior, the constant talk of his brilliant protégé. Chloe. The late nights weren't about work. They were about her. The hushed calls weren't to his board. They were to his mistress. The little box wasn't for a future surprise for Yasmin. It was a Cartier necklace for the other woman he had gotten pregnant. The baby moon he was taking wasn't to prepare for fatherhood with his wife. It was to celebrate a new family he was starting with his employee. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, a low, wounded sound escaping her lips. The betrayal was absolute, a multi-layered act of cruelty so profound it was almost elegant in its depravity. He wasn't just cheating. He was replacing her. He was taking their special place, their baby moon, their future, and giving it to someone else. Her grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. The life she had built, the man she loved, the future she was carrying in her womb, it was all a lie. A meticulously constructed, beautifully presented lie. But then through the fog of pain, a different feeling began to surface. It started as a spark in the pit of her stomach and grew into a wildfire of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the fury of a woman scorned, yes. But more than that, it was the protective rage of a mother. This man, her husband, was not just betraying her. He was betraying their unborn son. He was creating a world of chaos and deception for his child before he even took his first breath. Yasmin wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her expression hardening. She was not a victim to be pitied. She was a Vanderbilt. She was a Redford, and she would not be erased. She returned to the laptop, her movements now precise and clinical. She needed more than just suspicion. She needed undeniable proof. She navigated to a travel folder she knew he kept. It was filled with itineraries from his past business trips. And there it was. A new file created 2 weeks ago. SBH Retreat. She clicked it open. The confirmation was for a 7-night stay at the Elysian Villas, the most exclusive and private resort on the island, a place so luxurious it made their usual 5-star haunts look common. The booking was for the Villa Serafina, a secluded 3-bedroom compound with a private beach, a full staff and an infinity pool that melted into the Caribbean Sea. And then she saw the flight details. A private Gulfstream G650 chartered from a discreet aviation firm. Her eyes scanned the passenger manifest. 2 names, Howard Redford, Chloe Sterling. There it was, the black and white indisputable proof. Her heart didn't break this time. It turned to stone. She saved a copy of the entire itinerary to a hidden file on a secure cloud server she had maintained since her gallery days. She photographed the screen with her phone. Evidence. She thought about what to do next. Call him, confront him when he returned. The thought of a screaming match, of his inevitable gaslighting and false apologies, filled her with disgust. It was beneath her. It was unproductive. A messy emotional confrontation was what he would expect. He would use her pregnancy, her hormones against her. He would try to manage the situation to control the narrative just as he controlled everything else. No, she would not give him that satisfaction. She would not play his game. She would invent a new one, with new rules. Her mind went to her prenuptial agreement. At the time it had felt like a formality, a distasteful but necessary piece of paperwork for a man of Howard's wealth. Her own family lawyer had insisted on certain clauses. Clauses Yasmin had barely paid attention to. She remembered one specifically, an infidelity clause. It was ironclad. In the event of proven adultery, the division of assets shifted dramatically in her favor. Her lawyer, a shrewd old man named Samuel Blackwood, had called it the Apocalypse Clause. At the time she had laughed. Now it was her weapon. But Samuel was a family friend, gentle and diplomatic. She needed more than that. She needed a warrior. She needed someone who would not just handle a divorce but orchestrate a takedown. There was only one name that came to mind. A name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the elite circles of New York. Eleanor Vance. Vance wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend, a titan of matrimonial law, who had dismantled the empires of some of the most powerful men in the country. She was brilliant, ruthless, and devastatingly expensive. She took on only a handful of cases a year, and she never lost. Yasmin stood up, her back straight, her resolve absolute. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Howard thought he was in paradise, celebrating his new life. He had no idea he was flying into the eye of a hurricane. A hurricane named Yasmin. She picked up her phone not to call her husband, but to make the most important call of her life. She found the number for Eleanor Vance's private office. As the phone began to ring, she looked out the window again. The city lights no longer seemed indifferent. They seemed like an army waiting for her command. Eleanor Vance's office. A crisp voice answered. "My name is Yasmin Redford," she said, her voice steady and clear, devoid of any tremble. "I need to schedule an immediate and confidential consultation with Ms. Vance. It's a matter of some urgency." The game was on. The offices of Vance and Associates were located in the Seagram building on Park Avenue, a masterpiece of corporate modernism that projected an aura of untouchable power. The interior was surprisingly serene, decorated in muted tones of gray cream and slate. It was a place designed to calm frayed nerves and focus the mind on the cold, hard calculus of divorce. Yasmin was led into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Eleanor Vance rose from behind a large, imposing desk made of polished obsidian. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani suit. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp geometric bob, and her eyes, behind a pair of severe-looking glasses, were the color of chips of ice. They missed nothing. Mrs. Redford, she said, her voice a low modulated instrument of command. She didn't offer a handshake but gestured to the chair opposite her desk. Thank you for coming in. Your call was compelling. Yasmin sat placing her crocodile Hermes bag beside her. She felt a strange sense of calm. In this room with this woman, her chaotic emotions were liabilities. Only facts mattered. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Ms. Vance. Please, call me Eleanor. In my experience, urgency of this nature means the stakes are high. So tell me, Yasmin, why are you here? Without preamble, Yasmin laid out the story. She spoke with a detached precision that belied the raw wound in her soul. She detailed Howard's recent behavior, the discovery of his secret relationship with Chloe Sterling, the damning evidence on his laptop, the resort booking the private jet, manifest the search history for prenatal care and Cartier necklaces. She spoke of their assets, the penthouse, the art collection, the shares in Nexus Capital, held in her name as part of their marital agreement. She concluded by mentioning the infidelity clause in her prenup. Throughout her account, Eleanor Vance was perfectly still. She didn't take notes. She simply listened, her icy gaze fixed on Yasmin's face, absorbing every detail, every nuance. When Yasmin finished, a long silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward slightly. And your husband is at this moment at the Elysian Villas in St. Barts with his pregnant mistress. That is correct, Yasmin confirmed. He believes you are at home awaiting his return, none the wiser. Yes. Eleanor's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It was not a smile of warmth, but of appreciation for a particularly interesting strategic problem. Good, she said softly. The element of surprise is our greatest asset. Most women in your position would have called him screaming. They would have given him time to hide assets, to create a counter-narrative, to prepare for war. You did not. That tells me you are not most women. Yasmin felt a flicker of pride. I have no intention of letting him control this. Excellent, Eleanor said, her voice gaining a steely edge. Because we are not going to file for divorce in the traditional way. A quiet filing gives him time to react, to move his money through the labyrinthine shell corporations men like your husband are so fond of. No, we are going to execute what I like to call a decapitation strike. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to Yasmin as she surveyed the city below. We will file a petition for dissolution of marriage with the New York Supreme Court first thing tomorrow morning. Simultaneously, we will file an ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order. This is key. We will ask the judge to freeze every known asset. Bank accounts, brokerage accounts, credit cards, property titles, personal and corporate. We will argue that there is a significant risk of dissipation of marital assets. A fancy way of saying your billionaire husband is about to hide his money now that he's been caught. Given that he is currently out of the country with his paramour, on whom he is clearly spending lavishly, the judge will almost certainly grant it. Yasmin listened, captivated by the cold, brutal efficiency of the plan. Eleanor turned back to face her. The order, once signed by the judge, will be transmitted electronically to every financial institution. By midday tomorrow, Howard Redford will be a billionaire on paper, but he won't be able to buy a cup of coffee. His corporate accounts at Nexus Capital will be frozen. Payroll, vendor payments, everything. The company will be paralyzed. This will force him to the negotiating table immediately and on our terms. The scale of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a corporate siege. He'll be furious, Yasmin breathed. That is the point, Eleanor replied. A furious man makes mistakes. A panicked man gives concessions. We want him shocked, stranded, and powerless. Which brings me to the delivery. She returned to her desk and fixed Yasmin with an intense look. We will not have a grubby process server from the city accost him. This needs to be a moment of maximum psychological impact. We will hire a high-end international courier service. A professional in a suit will arrive at his private villa in paradise. They will hand-deliver a package containing the summons, the divorce petition, and a copy of the judge's freezing order. He will be sunning himself with his mistress one moment and financially castrated the next. A vision flashed in Yasmin's mind. Howard poolside, his confident smile dissolving into disbelief and horror. The satisfaction was a dark, heady poison. There is one more thing, Eleanor continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. I want you to write him a note. A short one. To be included in the package. Nothing emotional. Nothing angry. Just a simple, clear message that this is your decision. It's important that the final blow comes from you. The next 24 hours were a blur of focused activity. Yasmin worked tirelessly with Eleanor's team of forensic accountants and legal aides. She provided them with every piece of financial information she had. Account numbers, she had memorized names of his private bankers, details of their property holdings in London and the Hamptons. She proved to be a formidable resource, her mind sharp and her memory for detail exact. Her years of managing multi-million-dollar art acquisitions had made her fluent in the language of money and assets. As the legal machinery churned, Yasmin felt a profound shift within herself. The grief, while still present, was packed away in a locked room in her heart. In its place was a cold, driving purpose. She was no longer just Yasmin Redford, the wife. She was a general commanding an army, moving pieces on a chessboard of immense consequence. She did it all while fielding Howard's daily calls from St. Barts. "Hello, darling," he'd said on the first call, his voice breezy and warm. "The weather is incredible. You would love it. I wish you were here." "I wish I were there too," she'd replied, her voice a perfect imitation of wistful longing. The ease with which she lied was terrifying, a skill she hadn't known she possessed. She was a performer just like Chloe. "How are you feeling? How's the little guy?" "We're fine," she said, one hand on her belly. "Just missing you." Each lie was a small piece of her soul chipping away, but she held firm. She was protecting her son, building a firewall around their future. On the morning the papers were to be filed, Yasmin sat at her own desk. A delicate antique piece of furniture that stood in stark contrast to the brutal modernity of Howard's office. She took out a sheet of her personalized cream-colored stationery. Her handwriting, usually a graceful flowing script, was now tight and controlled. Eleanor had advised her to be concise. She thought for a long time, the pen hovering over the paper. What could she say to the man who was the love of her life and the architect of her greatest pain? In the end, she wrote only 2 sentences. 2 sentences that conveyed everything he needed to know. "Howard, I know about Chloe. I know about the baby. Enjoy St. Barts. Yasmin." She sealed the note in its matching envelope. It was the most civilized and yet the most savage thing she had ever done. Late that afternoon, Eleanor called. "The judge has signed the order," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "The wire transfers to the banks are complete. The assets are frozen. The courier is on a flight to St. Martin and will take a private charter to St. Barts. He will deliver the package to Villa Serafina tomorrow at noon local time." Yasmin hung up the phone. It was done. The storm she had gathered was about to make landfall. She walked over to the vast window and looked down at the city. Far below, a yellow taxi, impossibly small, navigated the canyons of steel and glass. She felt a kinship with it, a small but determined entity moving with purpose through a world of giants. Howard had once told her that in his business, timing was everything. You had to know the exact moment to strike to ensure maximum gain. It seemed she had learned his lessons well. Tomorrow at noon, in his sun-drenched paradise, Howard Redford would learn that his wife was a much better student than he had ever imagined. The Caribbean sun was a benevolent god, casting a brilliant warm glow over the island of St. Barts. In the exclusive enclave of the Elysian Villas, perched high on the cliffs overlooking Governor Beach Paradise, was a tangible reality. At Villa Serafina, the sound was of gentle waves kissing a private stretch of sand, the clinking of ice in crystal glasses, and the soft, satisfied laughter of its 2 occupants. Howard Redford lay on a plush white sun lounger, a picture of contented masculinity. He had shed the tension of New York like a heavy coat. His skin was bronzed, His eyes, shielded by designer sunglasses, were closed in blissful repose. Beside him, Chloe Sterling glowed. Her pregnancy, just entering its 5th month, was a neat, compact bump under her stylish bikini. She ran a hand through her dark hair, her eyes sparkling with a triumphant light as she gazed at the man beside her. "Isn't it perfect, Jules?" she murmured, leaning over to kiss his shoulder. "Just perfect. Almost perfect," he said, opening his eyes and smiling at her. He reached into the beach bag beside him and pulled out the small navy blue Cartier box. "This might help." Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She opened the box to reveal the Trinity necklace, 3 intertwined bands of rose yellow and white gold. It was delicate, iconic, and impossibly expensive. "Oh, Howard," she breathed, her eyes welling with tears. "It's beautiful." "A symbol," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "For us. For our new beginning. A new family." He conveniently ignored the fact that he was still married, that he had a wife 7 months pregnant with his firstborn son in New York. In this sun-drenched bubble, that life that Yasmin felt a million miles away. Here with Chloe, he was reborn, unshackled from the weight of old money and tradition that Yasmin represented. Chloe was his future, a reflection of his own voracious ambition. As he fastened the necklace around her neck, a man appeared at the edge of the terrace. He was dressed not in resort wear, but in a lightweight gray business suit. He held a sleek leather portfolio. He was discreet, professional, and utterly out of place. Jean-Pierre, the villa's butler, followed a step behind him, looking flustered. "Monsieur Redford, my apologies." This gentleman insisted. "A delivery for you." Howard's brow furrowed in annoyance. "I'm not expecting anything." The courier stepped forward. "Mr. Howard Redford?" he asked, his accent vaguely European. "Yes." Howard answered, his tone clipped. "I have an urgent personal delivery for you from New York." He extended the thick document-sized envelope. It was heavy, official-looking. Howard sighed, taking the package. He assumed it was from his office, some tedious document the board needed him to sign. "Fine, thank you," he said dismissively, placing it on the table beside him, intending to ignore it. "Sir," the courier said, not moving, "my instructions are to wait until you have personally opened the package and acknowledged its contents." Howard shot him a look of pure irritation. The arrogance of it was astounding. "Instructions from whom?" "From the office of Eleanor Vance, on behalf of your wife, Mrs. Yasmin Redford." The name hit Howard like a physical blow. Eleanor Vance. He knew that name. Every billionaire in New York knew that name. It was a name synonymous with ruin. "And then on behalf of your wife, Yasmin." The blood drained from his face. The warm, benevolent sun suddenly felt cold and menacing. Chloe, sensing the drastic shift in his demeanor, sat up straight, her hand protectively on the new necklace. "Jules, what is it? Who is Eleanor Vance?" Howard didn't answer. His hands, suddenly clumsy, fumbled with the clasp of the envelope. He tore it open, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The first document he pulled out was a summons to the Supreme Court of the State of New York. The bold letters at the top screamed at him. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." He stared at it, his mind refusing to comprehend the words. Divorce. Yasmin was divorcing him. How could she possibly know he had been so careful? His mind raced, trying to find a foothold in the crumbling reality. It had to be a bluff, a misunderstanding. But then he saw the next document. It was dozens of pages long. The motion for the temporary restraining order. He scanned the text, his eyes catching phrases that made his stomach clench. Irrefutable evidence of adultery. Significant risk of dissipation of marital assets. Commingling of funds for the purposes of extramarital activities. Attached to the back were the exhibits. Exhibit A. A copy of the flight manifest for the private jet with his name and Chloe Sterling's. Exhibit B. The reservation confirmation for the Villa Serafina. Exhibit C. A printout of his internet search history. He felt a profound, sickening sense of exposure. She knew everything. Chloe, now deeply alarmed, tried to read the papers over his shoulder. "Howard, what is going on?" He waved her away, his focus entirely on the final damning document. The judge's order. It was stamped signed. He read the operative paragraphs and the world tilted on its axis. It is hereby ordered that all personal and corporate bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and lines of credit listed in Exhibit D, held in the name of Howard Redford and/or Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford, are hereby frozen. It is further ordered that all assets of Nexus Capital LLC are hereby frozen, pending a full accounting of marital funds. Frozen. All of it. The word echoed in the sudden ringing silence of his mind. He was sitting in a $50,000 a night villa, a billionaire on paper, and he suddenly didn't have a dollar to his name. His hand trembled as he reached for the last item in the envelope. It was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. Yasmin's stationery. He recognized her elegant, precise handwriting. He read the two short, devastating sentences. "Howard, I know about Chloe. I know about the baby. Enjoy St. Barts. Yasmin." It was the polite, calm civility of the note that shattered him completely. It wasn't the note of a hysterical, heartbroken woman. It was the note of an executioner. Cold, final, absolute. He dropped the papers which scattered across the sun-drenched stone. He lunged for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock it. He tried to open his banking app. A red banner flashed across the screen. Account access restricted by court order. He tried his corporate account. The same message. He tried his personal Centurion card. He pulled up the app. Card suspended. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized him. He was trapped. Stranded in paradise with his mistress, with no access to the money that defined his entire existence. Nexus Capital, his empire was paralyzed. Payroll was due next week for thousands of employees. His deals, his reputation, everything was about to implode. Howard, Chloe's voice was sharp, panicked. She had picked up the divorce papers. She knows about the baby. What does this mean? Assets frozen? Howard didn't answer her. He was staring out at the impossibly blue sea, but he didn't see it. He saw only the calm, disappointed face of his wife. The wife he had underestimated. The wife he had dismissed as hormonal and insecure. The quiet, graceful woman who had just brought his entire world crashing down around him with nothing more than a pen and a phone call. The courier who had been watching the scene unfold with professional detachment finally spoke. "Mr. Redford, do you acknowledge receipt?" Howard slowly turned his head, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. He felt a primal scream building in his chest, a roar of fury at his own stupidity, at Yasmin's unexpected treachery. He had come to paradise to celebrate a new beginning, but he had walked directly into the meticulously planned end of his life as he knew it. And the worst part, the part that twisted in his gut like a knife, was the chilling finality of her note. Enjoy St. Barts. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a curse. The paradise of Villa Serafina transformed into a luxurious prison cell almost instantly. The serene bubble of sun, sea, and champagne popped, leaving behind the acrid smell of panic and recrimination. Howard's first instinct, the instinct of a man used to solving every problem with his checkbook, was to fight, to call his lawyers, his bankers, his board members. He stabbed at his phone, dialing his lead attorney at Nexus Capital. The call went to voicemail. He tried his personal wealth manager at Goldman Sachs. Voicemail. He soon realized the horrifying scope of Eleanor Vance's strategy. The court order wouldn't have just gone to the banks. It would have gone to his key personnel, advising them that all communication regarding financial matters was to be directed through Vance's office. He was cut off, isolated. Chloe, her initial shock curdling into fear, watched him pace the terrace like a caged tiger. The Cartier necklace felt like a cold weight on her skin. now no longer a trophy, but a brand. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How are we supposed to pay for this place? How are we getting home? Don't you think I'm trying to figure that out?" Howard snarled, turning on her. The charm he had cultivated was gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, desperate man beneath. "This is your fault. My fault." Chloe shot back, her doe eyes flashing with anger. "You're the one who was married. You told me she was fragile, that you were going to leave her after the baby was born. You said you had it all under control." "I did have it under control," he roared. "But I underestimated her. I underestimated what she was capable of." Their argument spiraled, the beautiful fantasy of their future dissolving into a bitter blame game. All the while, the sun continued to shine and the waves continued to crash, indifferent to the implosion of their affair. Back in New York, Yasmin was the picture of calm control. She sat with Eleanor Vance in the lawyer's obsidian-walled office, monitoring the fallout. Eleanor's phone had been ringing incessantly. Panicked calls from Nexus Capital's board members, from Howard's army of financial advisors, even from the charter jet company, demanding to know how they would be paid for the return flight from St. Barts. Eleanor handled each call with surgical precision. "Mr. Redford's assets are under a court-ordered freeze," she would state calmly. "All inquiries are to be directed to my office in writing." "No, I cannot authorize any payments at this time. He's trapped." Yasmin said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "For now," Eleanor cautioned. "Men like your husband are cornered animals. He will get creative. He will find a line of credit call in a favor from someone off the books. Our goal wasn't to strand him forever, but to force his hand. He will have to negotiate. And when he does, he will be negotiating from a position of absolute weakness." The first twist came 2 days later. Howard, having exhausted all his official channels, made a desperate call to a man he knew from his early, hungrier days, a shadowy private equity magnate named Marcus Thorne, with a reputation for operating in the gray areas of international finance. Howard begged for a short-term, high-interest loan, just enough to get home and mount a legal defense. Marcus Thorne agreed, but the price was steep. It wasn't just interest he wanted, it was information. He wanted inside knowledge of Nexus Capital's proprietary trading algorithms, the crown jewels of Howard's empire. Cornered and desperate, Howard agreed. What Howard didn't know was that Marcus Thorne had a silent partner in his equity firm, a partner who had been feeding him information about Howard for months, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability to strike. That partner was Yasmin's father, Harrison Vanderbilt. Harrison, a man of immense quiet power from the world of old money, had always distrusted Howard. He saw him as a flashy, arrogant upstart who didn't deserve his daughter. When Yasmin had come to him, not for help, but simply to inform him of her plan, he had put his own chess pieces in motion. He knew Howard's type. When cornered, he would turn to someone like Thorne. Harrison's investment in Thorne's firm gave him a listening post right inside Howard's desperate plea. The call was recorded, providing Eleanor with undeniable proof that Howard was attempting to sell off corporate secrets, which were also marital assets, in direct violation of the court order. Contempt of court. Eleanor set a predatory gleam in her eye as she listened to the recording. "This is beautiful. We can use this to strip him of his control over the company entirely. We can petition the judge to appoint an independent receiver to run Nexus Capital." The second, more personal twist came from Chloe Sterling herself. After 2 days of being trapped with a furious, broke Howard, the fantasy was well and truly over. She saw the man he was without his money, volatile, selfish, and weak. Using the villa's Wi-Fi, she did something she should have done months ago. She researched Eleanor Vance, and in her research she found articles about another of Vance's famous cases, a case involving a faked pregnancy and a fraudulent claim on a wealthy industrialist. A seed of an idea began to form. Chloe contacted Eleanor Vance's office, directly requesting a secret meeting. She claimed to have information that would be invaluable to Yasmin's case. Yasmin, against Eleanor's initial advice, agreed to a video call. She needed to see the woman who had tried to destroy her life. On the screen, Chloe looked pale and diminished, the confident glow completely gone. "Mrs. Redford." "Yasmin." She began, her voice shaky. "I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am not the monster you think I am. Howard. He lied to me. He told me your marriage was over, a loveless arrangement. He said you were emotionally unstable. And you chose to believe him." Yasmin asked, her voice like ice. "I was a fool," Chloe admitted. "But I'm also pregnant with his child, and now he is ruined and I am trapped. I want to help you. In exchange for consideration." "What kind of consideration?" Eleanor cut in, her tone sharp. "A settlement," Chloe said, finding a sliver of her old confidence. "A trust fund for my child. And in return I will testify that Howard was actively planning to defraud you. That this entire baby moon was a precursor to him hiding assets in offshore accounts under my name. I have emails. He was careless." Yasmin looked at the young woman on the screen. She saw the desperation, the calculated self-interest. It was a tempting offer. Chloe's testimony would cement their case and utterly ruin Howard. But something in Yasmin's gut told her to be cautious. Her motherly instinct was screaming. "Chloe," Yasmin said, her voice softening slightly. "Before we discuss any deals, I want one thing. A doctor in St. Barts is going to come to your villa. He will perform an ultrasound. I want to see the image of my husband's child." Chloe's face froze. A flicker of pure panic shot through her eyes before she masked it. That's an invasion of my privacy." "It's a condition of any negotiation," Yasmin stated flatly. "No scan, no deal. You have 1 hour to agree." Yasmin ended the call. The silence in the room was thick with tension. "You think she's lying?" Eleanor asked. "I think," Yasmin said, her hand on her own very real kicking belly, "that a woman who is truly 5 months pregnant doesn't panic at the thought of an ultrasound." An hour later, the call came not from Chloe, but from a frantic Howard. Marcus Thorne had informed him that their deal was off, that Harrison Vanderbilt was involved, and that he was now facing contempt charges. He was broken. "Yasmin, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "I'll do anything. I'll give you whatever you want. Just call this off. You've destroyed me." "You destroyed us, Howard," she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "You did this." As he continued to plead, an email dinged in Eleanor's inbox. It was from the international courier service they had used. The man who delivered the papers had submitted his final expense report. He noted that upon leaving the villa, he had passed the trash receptacle at the end of the long driveway. Sticking out of the top was the distinctive navy blue Cartier box. He had thought nothing of it, but in light of the high-profile nature of the case, decided to mention it. He also attached a photo from his phone. Eleanor opened the image and turned the screen toward Yasmin. It showed the empty Cartier box, but lying beside it in the trash was something else. A small silicone prosthetic. The kind used by actresses, or perhaps by a woman trying to convincingly fake a pregnancy bump. It was the final ugly piece of the puzzle. Chloe wasn't pregnant. She had never been pregnant. The search for obstetrics in St. Barts wasn't for her care. It was likely Howard researching what a real 5-month pregnancy should look like. The entire affair, the baby, that was the foundation of their new life, was a complete and utter fraud, a scam designed to entrap a billionaire. And Howard, in his arrogance and ego, had fallen for it completely. Yasmin looked at the picture, then back at the city skyline. Her husband hadn't just betrayed her for another woman. He had betrayed her for a lie, a cheap, pathetic illusion. The rage and grief she had been holding back finally receded, replaced by a profound, almost pitiful sense of clarity. He wasn't a monster. He was a fool. And his empire was crumbling not because of a grand passion, but because of a grand deception he had been too blind to see. Her phone buzzed again. It was Howard calling for the 10th time. She silenced the call and looked at Eleanor. "It's over," Yasmin said. "Let's finish this." The end wasn't a fiery explosion, but the quiet, deliberate dismantling of a life. Armed with proof of Howard's attempted fraud and Chloe's deception, Yasmin held all the cards. The divorce settlement was not a negotiation, it was a surrender. Yasmin retained the Manhattan penthouse, the art collection, and a controlling interest in Nexus Capital as stipulated by the Apocalypse Clause in their prenup. She had the board install an interim CEO, a steady hand to guide the company out of the chaos Howard had created. Howard was left with a fraction of his former fortune and a reputation shattered beyond repair. Chloe Sterling vanished, last heard of boarding a flight to Dubai, the fake pregnancy and Cartier necklace, her only parting gifts from a life she almost had. Months later, Yasmin stood in the nursery of the penthouse. The room was bathed in the soft afternoon light, decorated in serene shades of cream and blue. In her arms, she held her son Daniel Vanderbilt Redford. He was small, perfect, and blessedly real. He had his father's stormy eyes, but Yasmin hoped he would have her strength, her perception. She looked out at the city, no longer a cage or a battlefield, but simply a view. It was the backdrop to her new life, a life she had seized from the wreckage of a lie. She was not just a wife or a mother. She was the architect of her own future, a matriarch in the making, proving that the deepest betrayals can sometimes forge the strongest survivors. Thank you for listening to this story of love, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. The story of Yasmin Redford reminds us that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. She turned her pain into power and rewrote her own ending.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.